Hello, I'm Jamie Jean, and today I'll be presenting the lightweight algorithm Photon. Photon was invented by John Thomas and Axel Postman because of the need of security in devices that are limited in memory, such as new IoT devices that are being invented today. The Photon algorithm is a hashing function that works by using an extended version of the sponge function framework to mitigate the problem that small message scenarios create for the regular sponge function framework. The response function worked by absorbing the message chunks using R bitrate and then XORing them iteratively to the bitrate part of the internal state, then squeezing the output with the permutation P. The inspiration behind Photon is the community likes very compact hash functions. SHA-1 and SHA-2 are much too large to fit in a very constrained hardware. A basic RFID tag, for example, may have a total gate count of anywhere from 1K to 10K, with only 200 to 2K gate budgeted for security. So the main goal of the Photon algorithm is to keep the internal size memory as low as possible, hence why the sponge function framework is used. Not only is Photon easily the smallest hash function known so far, but it also achieves excellent error throughput and trade-off. In terms of security, Photon was modeled using AES-like computation as it offered confidence in design strategy and because the creators could always look back and compare their work with previous AES cryptanalysis. Basically, the approach that the inventors of Photons took would provide a tweaked AES cipher with the same diffusion properties as the original one. The primary target for the Photon algorithm is the uprising of the RFID tags. For those who don't know, the RFID tags are a type of tracking system that uses smart barcodes in order to identify items. Basically, mainly retail stores uses them for clothing and equipment and stuff. So, um, the way the sponge function worked, first it was introduced by Bertoni et al. As a new way of building hash functions from a fixed permutation. The internal state S of T bits composed of C capacity and a bit rate of an R bit rate, where T equals C plus R is first initialized with some fixed values. Then the absorbing and squeezing process takes place with permutation P. For an n-bit sponge hash function, capacity C and bit rate R, when the internal primitive is modeled as random permutation, one obtains the minimum between 2 to the power of n divided by 2 and 2 to the power of c divided by 2 as collision resistance bound, and the minimum of 2 to the power of n and to the power of c divided by 2 as second pre-image bound. And most generic uses, the slow computation are expected from the sponge. For collision, which is basically two distinct messages hashing the same value, and pre-image, which is a message that hashes to a given challenge output value, behind basically the same minimums that I just previously mentioned. And then you have the pre-image, which is the minimum between 2 to the power of the minimum n and t. You have the minimum of 2 to the power of the minimum n and t, and the max 2 to the power of minimum n and t minus r prime, which is the output of r, and 2 to the power of c divided by 2. It's kind of confusing, I know. In case of the small message problem, the small bit rate r seems to be slow so, since one needs to call n divided by r minus 1 times the internal permutation to complete the final squeezing process. As you can see, the smaller r, the greater the output will be. A long message can have a throughput of 1.47 kilobits per second, which drops to 0.63 kilobits per second for small messages. On the other side, the small message effect is reduced by the fact that having a small bit rate will reduce the amount of padding actually hashed. The padding is the padding simply consists of adding a 1 or a 0 to basically fill the last message block. Note that the lightweight proposal that's based off classics David Myers, the DM-Present 80, has a throughput of 14.63 kilobits per second for a very long message, which dropped to 5.85 kilobits per second for 96 input message, because in the latter case, many of the compression functions calls are spent in order to handle padding blocks. In order to mitigate the small message issue, it was proposed to extend the sparring framework by allowing the number of bits extracted during each iteration of the squeezing process to be different from the bit rate r to the power of 4. Increasing R prime will reduce the time spent in the squeezing process, but might also reduce the pre-image security. On the contrary, decreasing R prime might improve the pre-image bound cost of the speed drop. Small messages. As long as the pre-image security remains an acceptable bound, which it does, this configuration can be interesting in many scenarios where only a tiny input are to be hashed. More precisely, in this new model, the best known generic attach requires the same computation as the one previously mentioned 2 slides ago. The collision, the minimum between n to the power 2 to the power n divided by 2 and 2 to the power c divided by 2. The second pre-image, the minimum between 2 to the power n and 2 to the power c divided by 2, and the pre-image, the minimum between 2 to the minimum n to the n and t, and the max between the max of 2 to the power n 2 to the power of the minimum n and t minus r prime, and 2 to the power c divided by 2. In terms of AES, a fixed imputation P applies in the internal state of D2 elements of SB each, which can be represented as a D times D matrix, where P is composed of n all rounds, each containing 4 layers: add constant, C subcells, add constant, subcells, shift rows, and mixed column serial. I will go into details in further slides about these 4 layers. But for now, add constant simply consists in adding fixed values to the cells of the internal state. Subcells applies an S-bit X box to each of them. Shift rows rotate the position of the cells in each of the rows, while mixed column serial linearly mixes all the columns independently. Um, the AES permutation was chosen because they offer much confidence in design, as one can leverage from previous cryptanalysis work done on AES and AES like hash functions, and they AES like permutation all allow to derive very simple proofs on the number of active X boxes over a 4 round primitive. If the matrix underlying the mixed number is the maximum distance separable, then one can immediately show that at least d plus 1 times 2 x boxes will be active for any 4 round differential path. This bound is tight, and we already know differential path with only d plus 1 to the power 2 active x boxes for 4 rounds, which will be used later for security analysis purposes. Excuse me. Note that the permutation note that permutation that will be designed are fixed keys, so it'll naturally get rid of key related attacks or any issue that might arise from the construction of key schedule. Now, how the computation is done for the sponge. Each variant that is used is fully defined by the hash output size 64 between 64 and 256. Its output and its output rate are and R prime respectively. Therefore, each function is denoted as photon and R prime. The internal state size T, where the internal state size T equals C plus R depends on the hash output size. It can only take 5 distinct values: 100, 144, 196, 256, and 288. As a consequence, only 5 internal permutation P has to be identified, one for each internal size. The message M to hash is first padded by appending 1 bit and many zeros, as previously mentioned, such that the total length is a multiple of the bit rate, and can finally obtain one message block MO to ML minus 1 of each bit rate. The T-bit internal state is initialized by setting it to the value of SO equals IV to the first subset the first subset to the power of T minus R4 concatenated with N divided by 4 concatenated with R prime, sorry for the 0, where like I mentioned, the R sign is concatenation. For implementation purposes, note that each byte is interpreted in big endian form. Then, as from classical smart strategy, at the iteration I, we absorb the message MI on the leftmost part of the internal state, and then apply the permutation Si plus 1 equals PT st XOR with mi concatenated with the first subset to the power of c. And once all one messages blocks have been absorbed, the hash value is built by concatenating the successive R prime bit output block zi onto the appropriate output size and hash equals zo concatenated with zl prime minus 1 is reached, and L prime denotes the number of squeezing iteration, that is, L prime equals n divided by R prime minus 1. More precisely, Si is the R prime leftmost bit of the internal state SL plus 1, and half SLI plus 1 equals PT SL plus I, where 0 is less than or equal to I, less than or equal to L prime. And if the hash output size is not a multiple R prime, one just truncate S Z prime minus 1 to n R prime bits. This I'll go more in depth with this whole process in the actual presentation, in the actual report. But for the AS computation, the internal permutation is defined as PT, where T is an element of 100, 144, 256, 288. The internal state of NR round permutation is viewed as D times D matrix of S bit cells, and the corresponding value depending on T are given in table one. Table one, it will be in the present in the actual paper. I just didn't want to put it in the slides because it was too big. Note that the cell size 4 is always used, except for in table one we will know that the cells all fours is always used. Like I said, I'll go more in depth with that with this step in the actual paper. But for an add constant, which I mentioned, I'll explain into further detail. Basically, at round V, starting from the count of 1, first XOR a round constant RCV to each cells SI to 0 in the first column of the internal state. Then XOR distant internal constant ICD I to each cell SI of the cell of the same first column. Overall, for round V, we have S prime I0 equals SI0 XOR to RCV XOR to ICI for all 0 less than or equal to I is less than D. The round constant of RCV equals 1, 3, 7, 14, 13, 11, 6, 12, 9, 2, and 10. The internal constant, depending on the square size D and the row position I, that's given in table 1, which I'll add again. For the subcells, this simply applies an S-bit Xbox to each cell of the internal state. S0, S0, which is S prime, sorry for the typo, IJ equals Xbox Xij for all zeros less than I and J less than D. In the case of a 4-bit cell, the present Xbox is used while the 8-bit cell box for AES Xbox is used. Shift rows. As for the AES, for each row I, this layer rotates all cells to the left by I column position, namely S prime Ij equals Si J plus I mod D for all zeros less than I and J is less than D. Mix serial. The final mixing layer is applied to each column of the internal state independently. For each column, J input vector S0J, SD minus 1, J to the power of T. Apply D times the matrix AT equals serial Z0 all the way to ZD minus 1. That is for all zeros less than or equal to J is less than D. And that gives you Z prime 0, 0 to J until Z prime D minus 1 J, all that to the power of T equals the ADT times S0 to J all the way to the SD minus 1 to J, all that to the power of T, where the coefficient Z0 Z all the way to Z D minus 1 are given in table 1, which will be in the presentation once again. Yeah. So in terms of performance analysis, it is assumed that the message to be padded correctly in the IVs to be loaded at the beginning of the operation. Then it requires d times t, d times d plus d minus 1 plus d times d plus 1 clock cycles to form one round of implementation p, resulting in a total latency of 12 times 2 times z times d plus 1 minus 1 clock cycles. The table in the next slide compares the result of the previous work, so I'm sorted after pre-image and collision resistant level. Area requirements are provided in GE, while the latency is given in clock cycles for only the internal communication P and the whole hash function H. Further metrics are 30% gain in kbps. In order to have comparison for the best scenario and real world application, the latter two metrics for long messages and for 96-bit messages, where we do take padding into account as provided. In particular, that is that a 96 message is padded with IN0 required. Furthermore, construction needs additional 64-bit to encode the message in length. The parameter NCR and R prime stands for the hash output size, capacity, and the input rate and the output bit rate, respectively. Finally, the column pre gives a claim pre-image security, and column the claim collision security, and the power consumption strongly depends on technology used and cannot be compared between the different technologies in a fair manner. And this is a table. As you can see, you have N, which is the size, C, which is capacity, R is the bit rate, R prime. But basically, we're comparing Photon 80, 20, and 16 to the ampersand 128, the ampersand 128, and TCOP 200. As you can see, in terms of pre-image and collision, they're the same, except collision is 40, which is within the range. You also have the area which is in GE, and as you can see, Photon has a lower area than all of them really. The latency is also represented as mentioned the throughput, and basically the long message is the long message has a throughput of 111.13 all the way, and the short message has a 59.27, which is a pretty good ratio in comparison to speed and security level. So this whole graph is basically explaining the comparison between Photon and, as I mentioned, the previous lightweight algorithms that have already been presented to the cybersecurity community. And for the software, it really just compared the speed, the clock speed for each of for the different um size of photons really. So you have the 80, 128, 160, 224, and 256. And yeah, that's really it for performance analysis. In conclusion, the photon lightweight hash family function is one of the latest proposed lightweight algorithm. It is based on a well-known AES design strategy with the inclusion of a new mixing layer building method that is perfectly fit for small area scenarios. Photon is the smallest hash function, but also achieves excellent area and throughput trade-offs and obtain very acceptable performances with simple software implementation. And that is all. Thank you.